All right, welcome back to Equal Time Soccer. I'm Matt Pravratsky alongside my brother Mark, and we are here with the brand new head coach of Minnesota Aurora FC, a pretty familiar face for Equal Time followers and definitely a familiar face for Aurora fans, Jen Larrick. Jen, how you doing?
You're really good. Glad to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Jen is coming to us straight from the future. It is Wednesday morning where she's at because she's crushing it in New Zealand. Don't get too jealous, Minnesota fans. Hold back that jealousy. But Jen, let's start off broad. Let's start off with the top question. How does it feel to be the head coach of Aurora?
It feels great. I'm really excited, and I've loved all of my previous experiences with Aurora. So couldn't be more thrilled to be back at TCO Stadium and working with the incredible players that we have.
And yeah, for those, I sort of skipped the part where I assumed anyone watching this show would know the background. You were one of the inaugural members of the coaching staff. You've been part of some really good success in the team's history soccer-wise. You also, for a very inside baseball nugget, were at the very, very first kickoff meeting that I threw together because obviously I'd known you from all of your work on really what I would call community-focused soccer, expanding access to soccer. I think the first time you and I met might have been at the Like a Girl College Combine that you threw up in near Como Park in St. Paul, and that's such a great defining event for me to meet you at because you were such a big part of building that organization, which was really focused on getting these players that either they already had access to the game but weren't in a represented space in the game, like they were playing in these really cool ethnic leagues which exist all across the Twin Cities that like none of us get to see or be fans of, but there's just great soccer. And you were part of a group that wanted to help those players not only expand the access that they had because they already had their own soccer spaces, but you wanted to elevate them, give them opportunity. And so obviously that's work that Mark and I are super, big fans of, expanding access to the game, making things more affordable, accessible. But talk about how that work, which is really how I first got to meet you, fits into your role, or why you like how that fits in with the values of Aurora.
Yeah. Well, I'll just start, Matt, by saying thank you for taking that initial meeting with me. At the time we didn't know each other, and from jump you believed in the mission of, expanding access for girls and women in soccer is not the right way to talk about it, right? Because as you said, so often these communities already have really thriving, vibrant leagues and ways of playing. And what it's really about is your more resourced organizations expanding their viewpoints and frameworks of understanding. And that is absolutely something I am still passionate about. Whenever I'm back in Minnesota for the summer, I still play for Jalisco, shout out to Jalisco. And there's players that I've met through that league who are some of the best players I've played with my whole life.
Oh yeah.
But, girls and women's soccer in the US is massive. It's huge. And I think that's beautiful and incredible. And at times it can be a double-edged sword because often to participate, it's expensive and you have to travel a lot.
Right.
And so sometimes really great players who love the game, who are capable of playing at a really high level, are left out, are not seen. And a big part of my job as the Aurora head coach is recruiting. And I'm really open and wanting to look for players in unconventional places. I'm here for a junior college player who's killing it. I'm here for a player in Minnesota who plays, pick up for 3 hours every night of the week. I am not going to judge somebody, just based on their resume. It doesn't mean I won't talk to you. And, certainly there'll be limits on my time, but as an ethos, I know that good players can be developed in all sorts of environments.
Yeah. And I think it's sort of one thing to have those values and espouse those values. And it's another thing to have built that foundation and built that appreciation and also built the credibility, for you and us as sort of white people coming into these spaces, and Mark and I as like white men coming into these spaces.
I'm fully white, not just sort of white, Matt, just so you know. Yeah.
I don't think I said sort of.
No, you said sort of.
For us to go in as like white people into these spaces, and for Mark and I as white men in these spaces, you really have to have some humility of like, these are existing spaces, these people have built this place, we're coming in, and we could be, negative influences, we could be chaotic influences, we could be unwanted influences, and you're someone, just to give you credit, because I'm sure you're not going to do a lot of bragging on the show, you've built a lot of credibility in those spaces, which is why I think some players might actually like hear your offer and hear it seriously. And like one great example is I went and watched the Aurora tryouts for the UPSL a couple weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was. And Katie Brink does so much work to help make that club accessible to us and help us cover that club, and those players then get a lot more attention, which is great. And I remember watching the warm-ups, and tryouts are already brutal for folks like Mark and I because we're not quite technical enough to really even like watch that many players at once and fully appreciate the tryout setting. And the Valora tryout was so funny because I was just marking numbers of like, oh, 5 looks good, 16 looks good, 18 has good touch, 10 has good touch. And you get to the end of tryout, and I would ask Katie, I'm like, hey, where'd she play? And like 2/3 of the players I marked were just like players from like this ethnic group that plays on this ethnic league that plays on Sundays, or this one that plays on Thursdays. And they're just such mainstays of like composure, touch, feel, like, feel for the space. But I just love that you mentioned that. I obviously, we sort of spoke to this a little bit, but there aren't, we say all the time there aren't enough women coaching in the game, but there definitely aren't enough women as head coaches in the game. Mark and I tend to deal with teams that range on a spectrum from not even attempting it to doing it for real. Some teams literally never hire women, and that's a great reminder of like, okay, I see where your values are. A lot of them will sort of fake it, like hire an assistant at the back of the bench and then never progress them, and they just
grad
exist.
assistant, yeah.
And then some will do sort of the medium style where they do hire women consistently, but they sort of never let them get to that top role. They let them be workers, but they don't let them like get the title. And I think I know that you've experienced that in certain spots. But then, clubs that actually hire women, it's the fewest of the few. And that's why it's such a big deal. And so that's why we always celebrate every time a woman actually gets hired, because it shouldn't still be unique. But like for you, that's what it looks like from the outside to us, seeing those types of clubs. For you as a candidate, I can't imagine how crazy it is to live that life where you're trying to progress. Like, we get to just experience it and analyze it. You have to live it in your bones. Is that sort of what it feels like as a young coach coming up, especially as a young woman? Or, are we missing nuances there?
No, I mean, I do think if you look at the research, there's still a gender equity gap across all industries. I don't think coaching is an exception, whether it's opportunity or pay. Shout out to Ashley St. Aubin, a former player of mine, current coach at NDSU. She did some master's research on not only the women facing a glass ceiling, but I believe what she called a glass cliff, where if is sort of in a precarious position, often that is sort of when they'll hire women. So you're adopting a more challenging situation, and then you're less likely to succeed, and that can sort of be a block in your career. I will say, like, I do want to highlight bright spots so we can sort of live a bit more. I coached at Hamlin with Emily Kripe, fantastic human. They had a female coach at Hamlin. And when she was due to have a baby in season, she brought me on as a sort of acting head coach. So I got that opportunity to be a head coach, and she got the opportunity to have a baby and not lose her job. That's an incredible example of supporting women in the workplace. I have prior experiences where I really was listened to and taken seriously, whether that's Augsburg, BBU, internationally Cardiff Met here in New Zealand. So I think I've certainly had to fight to be taken seriously, but I absolutely want to shine a bright spot that there are ways in clubs where you can be taken seriously. And then the other thing I'll just say is actually my sport coaching doctorate program, a big focus of my research is, yes, I do believe that hiring more women is crucial. It's important, access to opportunity. is not where it needs to be.
Yep.
And I am focusing on feminist approaches to coaching.
Right.
And that can be practiced by anybody of any gender. So I do think we can really push both the industry to hire more women, but also for the industry to look at like how are coaches approaching teaching? How are they socially interacting with others? And can we challenge everybody to be what my research would call more feminist? But I think there's ways to go about it that it's just sort of like more aligned with the best research in educational practices.
It's just inclusive, right, Jen? Yeah, it's like, it makes me think. I mean, also, by the way, it's like, I mean, if a guy is coaching a bunch of boys soccer players, they all benefit from having those values too. So like coaches having those values is positive for everyone. Like you said, it's a good way to turn it. Like we can't just always focus on, you know, like how it affects women and girls. Like this affects every player having those values in coaching. I mean, so that's a positive across the board. It's not just, like you said, I think it's not just feminism, right? This is more broader of just inclusive values for everybody to be seen.
No, I think that's spot on. You know, the number of times I've been in coach education rooms and people say, oh, you know, if you coach girls, you really have to focus more on the social elements of coaching. Coach boys, you really have to focus more on the winning and the competitive elements of coaching. And I think we're really sometimes in sports stuck in gender essentialism, and all people can benefit from, you know, social interaction. All people can benefit from competitive environments. It's just about, and I think really getting away from those sorts of ideas of the gender binary helps ultimately set places up to have a culture where they would hire more women too. I think those things go hand in hand.
I think that's such a good way to put it too, Jen, because I think, you know, when we get too stuck in a binary, like hire more women and that's the solution. And we've never really said it that way, but the implication could be read that way. It's such a good point that talking about what's the actual outcome we're hoping for? We're hoping for more opportunity for women. That's one outcome. We're hoping for, at least Mark and I are hoping for, and I think you're hoping for, coaches that treat players like humans, that like support them and teach them and help them grow. And so we do want more women to be hired because they do deserve as much opportunity as anyone else. And we also, frankly, like Mark and I at least, want more of the attributes people might stereotypically attribute to women, like you said, feminist ideals and all those things. But the truth is, if you just focus on only hiring women, you could see other programs like feel let off the hook. They're like, well, we already have a men health coach, so like we'll just skip this, whatever. And yeah, it's such a good way to put it. And coaching is so much more complex than Mark and I can ever really get into well on these shows because there's just so many layers you all deal with. I will say too, just before we go too quick, obviously, and apologies, Jen, you have to be on the air for this. I did reach out to the club for comment on, and Colette for comment. Neither one to provide an official statement. I will say sources have let me know, you know, the sporting staff was furloughed over the winter as part of like, you know, managing the finances. And then Colette was eventually, that furlough was made permanent. And so that obviously is the opening that created you coming. Just want to acknowledge that because there hasn't been an announcement from the club. So I'm assuming people were surprised. I was surprised. So I'm assuming people were, but just want to note that of me doing at least my bare bottom journalistic job before we get in. And then Mark, jump in.
Yeah. Baby. Let's dig in. I want to talk to you about building the squad, Jen, because now, I mean, once you get this news, you're fully in the mindset of like, this is only a couple months, right? It's not as if you are unfamiliar with the squad, but or the club, I should say. But in terms of actually recruiting, a lot of it is like trying to relate to players. You've been coaching a long time. I wonder with, you know, now you've had so much experience coaching. How much are you, when you're coaching and trying to get through to a player, relating to them as, when I was a player, I did this, I experienced this, you know, playing high-level college soccer at Florida or Minnesota? Or how much is it now focusing it through your lens of like the experiences you've had coaching? Have you found that shifting? Because I bet when you're 24 as a coach, it's a lot more about like, you know, when I was in the Big Ten tournament, you know, or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that.
How much do they respect the playing time references now, Jen, as it gets, you know, how much do you get a respect out of your experience as a player?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. When I first started coaching, like at Augsburg, whatever, like I sort of made a point to wear regular people clothes, polo for shirt or something, instead of the like warm-up kit for game day, because it was just a helpful, mindful snap of like, I'm not playing today. This game isn't for me. But that was over 10 years ago. I'm academically trained. I'm formally trained through U.S. Soccer, United Soccer coaches. I've got a bunch of experience now. Like I am a coach, and I don't struggle with that anymore. As far as relating to players, I would actually say the biggest lens through which I relate to players is probably informed through. I did a youth studies master's program, and it really was flexible, so it allowed me to look at coaching as youth work, kind of. And that program focused a lot on how do you just sort of sit down and really see the person in front of you, to get sort of high level about it. They brought in some phenomenology ideas, but really it's about, every day, get rid of your preconceived assumptions and just sit down with the person in front of you and say, tell me about yourself. So I really try to take that ethos into my relationships with players. If they had a bad day at training yesterday, I really try to be like, okay, tell me about yourself today. What can you bring today? And if, the first couple of phone calls we have, they're crabby or whatever, like I really do my best to just meet people afresh and anew as we go. And be curious about people, whether that's as a person or a player. And that training really did come from my master's program.
Yeah, that's a good lesson for anyone, is trying to, like, I think I try to do that, where you're like, try not to assume, ask the question, don't assume what someone, is saying and bring it on them, right? Ask them. But also as a follow-up, do they respect your game, Jen? Do they respect your game?
Yeah, you asked an element of that as well. You'd have to ask them. I hope so. I do think
we'll find out. Okay.
Yeah. Feel free to ask them on the interviews you do with them.
How often have you gone into training? How often, as a college coach, how often have you hopped in? At Aurora,
or even
you do
Aurora.
A lot. I mean, you're shooting and you're doing a lot. You're engaged in training, but you aren't necessarily like in a 5-on-5 that I've seen. And like when you were with Aurora, like how often are you still getting in there? Mix it up.
As an assistant, I jumped into the VIP trainings. So the players that are not on the squad for game days, we do a little training for them.
Little light training, yeah.
Jumped into those on occasion, been known to jump into those. And then in 2023, we didn't make it quite as far into the playoffs as we had hoped. So there were a few weeks after where we trained, and I jumped into that on occasion every once in a while. Really fun. I do think, it's players. I think you build a little something if you can knock a ball back and forth with them. I certainly, as a head coach, I'm not sure I'll be jumping in quite so much.
Well, you'll be too busy. You'll be surveying. You'll be standing at the edge with your arms crossed. You'll be surveying.
I think I'm seeing a sweet suit for Jen. I think she's going to upgrade. She's going to be one of those. She's moving up. She's going to have maybe like a nice,
I think so,
one of the Aurora colored suits,
I think
teal.
So too.
Yeah, I don't know.
She's already like halfway there. I mean, like this outfit right now is basically. This is
pretty good. This is actually Aurora head coach material.
I have been known to like a blazer on a game day. So
okay, I'm into it. It is funny because certain sports where it's like baseball is the funniest one. So it's like can be a 75-year-old man in a full, and you're like it's like a little boy on Halloween, but it's like 75-year-old, and like that's the only soccer people do it. A lot of them don't now, but like it works in soccer because the coaches are usually like fit. They're young enough. Like if you, I mean the gear is good.
For me, it helps just to be like, okay, this is a game day. Like I'm at work. This is an important meeting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not at the gym. This isn't a workout. I don't need to be my sweats. Like this is work.
Now I'm getting excited for the fits. Now the fits will include Jen in the pregame fit videos.
I can't wait.
But I bet you've done a lot of recruiting as a college coach. No, have you as an assistant? That's definitely something you end up getting. But this is, I mean, somewhat different when you get to recruit from a place of your program, so to speak, of like you are dictating what you're recruiting for. You're not, I used to work for politicians and I'd be talking about how great they were. And I'm like, he's great. He's going to be the best leader for you. Why don't you come with us?
Yeah.
But now you just get to talk about yourself, right? So like, how do you, and it's going to come quick and fast in terms of making the pitches, right? But like, I don't know how much that changes just in terms of like, like I said, the perspective of you recruiting for you, but like give your pitch. I mean, you're going to be talking to, and also you might be recruiting coaches, and I kind of curious about that, but both coaches and players, how are you recruiting to the Aurora project in 2025? Jen?
Make the pitch, baby. Make the pitch.
Okay, I'm not giving you my full pitch because the full pitch comes equipped with smart. A PowerPoint.
You can share screen right now.
There we go. Okay,
you can do the entire PowerPoint, baby.
Calling your bluff, Jen.
We're ready to learn.
What I will tell you is, you're right. So I've recruited, even just specifically at Aurora, I've recruited extensively in the past. And at the time, right, it was Nicole more in charge of the vision. But I will say, like, I really enjoyed working with Nicole. She was very collaborative. I think we kind of co-crafted a vision there. And for me, the new recruiting deck is sort of tweaking the foundation that Nicole, Jenny, Cassie, Colette, all of the staff from last year built. Like Aurora's got a great playing foundation. And for me, it's not a huge deviation from that because I was involved in creating that from the beginning.
Right.
So now it's just a few tweaks that how is this going to be more crafted towards who I am, how I see the game, how I approach teaching. And I think that's for me, it's a really smooth transition, right? There's players that potentially recruited for the years that I was there that maybe weren't the right fit then, but I can re-pick up that conversation. There's college coaches that I connected with then that I can re-pick up that conversation. And then separately, I've got college coach friends, connections just from my time playing and coaching the game, personal ones that I can tap out to. And then as far as building the coaching staff, like we touched on earlier, I am a big fan of being inclusive, and I studied and worked some with the Tucker Center for research on girls and women in sport. And everything that I was trained in, everything I learned there is you get the best candidates, you get the most diverse candidate pool when you advertise broadly. And so I want this to be a comprehensive search. I really want to take my time with it and make sure we get the right people in the room. And anyone watching who's interested is more than welcome to apply. Keep an eye on the website, LinkedIn, United Soccer Coaches for postings.
Well, and I'm curious too, when you talk about recruiting players, how much do you feel, because I've generally found, at least in the college side, but I think it's probably true in the summer stuff too, I like Mark and I can't help but use political analogies because we both have worked in politics, and
I used to recruit votes, baby, and I flipped them. I could flip them.
Well, one example I gave when we had Katie Offit on and talked about recruiting in general, what I said to her is being a candidate isn't the same as being an elected official. You just happen to have to do one to do the other. And it's like recruiting and coaching aren't really the same thing. You just happen to have to do one to do the other. Like there's not really an intrinsic overlap between someone who's good at recruiting and someone who's good at coaching. Some people are good at both, but like there's not really a direct, it's a very squiggly line to get there. For you, I think your coaching chops are, probably proven, like all of your education, all of your examples. In terms of recruiting, how did you think about like building that recruiting skill set versus because you've spent years and years and years building this coaching skill set, obviously, like all the credentials, but how did you build that and do you see them as different as like what I'm describing, and how did you build that recruiting skill set?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think they are different. I think they are different. Recruiting, coaching, very different skill sets. What I will say is I try to merge them as much as I can. And the reason being is a player commits to a coach. They don't commit to a recruiter.
Yeah.
So when a player's speaking to me, they want me to be my coach self as much as possible, because that's the person that they think they're committing to is me as a coach.
Right.
And so I think of myself as a coach. I spend a lot more time watching football matches and nerding out about tactics than I do, getting really amped up and excited about the latest email spreadsheet of people to reach out to recruiting wise. But the more that I can make recruiting feel like coaching, the more that I get excited about it, and the more that I think it's authentic and genuine for the player.
Right.
So how do I recruit? I reach out to coach friends that I like the way they coach. I like the way that they think about the game, and then I talk to players about what's important to me as a coach, what the team is going to be like, what training is going to feel like. I really try to bring them in as if it's a preseason meeting as opposed to a recruiting meeting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Try to talk to on the real level as if you're trying to make the plan together. Do you ever? I didn't think about this till you were just talking about it. The differentiation, because I think of like sports that are really heavy in recruiting, like college football and college soccer is like it too, but where PJ Fleck. I don't know if he knows what's going on in football. He seems to be a good recruiter. It's like hype.
Yeah.
But there's a degree of like they tap into something young people connect to. Do you ever talk to people in other sports like how they recruit? Because for instance, I find it it's a little insane and overwhelming, the level of like college basketball and football NIL recruiting. But it's also, so I don't like it that much, but it's fascinating and it's very specific. I don't know if you're going to pyramid scheme sales things to learn really good how do you draw people in, Jen? And then your genuine energy as well, but then how do you use the tools? There's a golf club in the meeting, set a golf club, a hotel room.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, just being involved with university athletic departments, you speak with other coaches from other sports for sure.
Right.
I will say the Aurora landscape is really different than a college landscape. Like, we are not college athletics. We don't have the same constraints around recruiting, for example. So there's freedom and flexibility there. And I think recruiting's at a really fascinating time overall with sports in the US. If you look at how NIL is changing things and then the proposed new revenue sharing, everybody involved in sports across the board is currently sort of unsure about what recruiting will look like in the future.
Right.
And what's really nice about Aurora is we're not in that NCAA landscape. I know what I can offer people, but I can still learn from friends in other sports, other areas, other universities who are figuring out how to navigate their landscape.
Are you on TikTok, Jen?
I am not. I refuse to do TikTok.
Neither am I. Solidarity, Jen. We're too old.
Yeah, we're both. We're both too old and too young somehow. It's like both.
I don't know, but no, I think too old. But I wondered if you felt because sincerely, if you feel like you have, you're like, because I'm not big on Instagram, whatever, but I do it to promote bartending in equal time. I don't really care about, you feel obligated. I don't know if you're so maybe, I don't know, maybe you got to get a TikTok going.
I will use social media as a recruiting tool as needed. I can't, at this point in time, I cannot imagine that would necessitate me getting a TikTok, but if it does.
But I think, here's the thing, Jen, because I'm not a huge fan of TikTok either, but it comes across other socials. I think you'd be kind of an ironic anti-TikToker.
Ooh.
And it would just be went on a recruiting visit today, talked to a player, did my thing, bye. And you're just you're not trying to you could vertical dance if you want, but we don't have to vertical dance. We don't want to.
When I get to the point of setting up a TikTok, I'll give you a call, Mark.
I think Brenna would be. I think ask Brenna. I think at Aurora. I think.
I think
I can barely use Instagram. So.
Right. Yeah. We're not great examples to ask about this.
Bad.
I will echo you. I think we're all a little too old to be the social media experts.
But Jen, you approach recruiting in a genuine way. You're not going to say, look at my TikTok. You're going to say, guess what?
True.
I don't know what TikTok is, man. I'm your soccer coach. I'm going to teach you about soccer.
Yeah, that's right. And here's the thing.
Yeah.
I think they're a little bit mutually exclusive. If I was doing too much on TikTok, I wouldn't have the time to learn about soccer.
Also, you're going to be so fun for these college players to they'll get to teach you everything. They'll tell you what's in. They'll tell you what's up. You're gonna every
She's used
time
to it.
every time Mark and I interview like a new summer league or college age player, I'm like, I'm sure I'm seem 50 years old to you. I'm sure we seem ancient because like these 20-year-olds, it's like, yeah, we seem like grandparents to you. That's
Yeah, that's
No,
right.
Matt, I'm hip. I'm with 24-year-olds all the time with the bar. So
True.
and that's what they say is they say hip. So that's how you know I'm hip.
And that's what, yeah.
That's what they would say.
And
But no, we should. That's how you know I'm down. But no, let's dig into the practical of the season, Matt. Let's go into W League talk.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, I think I'm super curious from your perspective, Jen. Like, you know, Mark and I obviously do this equal time thing to elevate, you know, Minnesota players, Minnesota teams. There's been a sort of an interesting mix on the Aurora side where Mark on that first year sort of referred to it as like a Mighty Ducks 2 situation where literally half the roster was Minnesotan and half was around the country, around the globe. It's teetered a little. I think last year it might have only been 4, and we'll use the term Minnesotan pretty royally, like, you know, any Minnesota program, any Minnesota connection. But, you know, what's the, I mean, in terms of, in your perspective, you talked about having more like community-based players, so obviously those are going to be local, but talk about that dynamic of, we really have had some incredible contributors from like the Addie Wickers of the world, the Kelsey Kafusis of the world, the like Tiana Harrises of the world, like the Raps. I mean, like these really big time players that you and the inaugural coaching staff helped bring in that have been mainstays, and, you know, plenty of Minnesotans too, like the Mariah Wins, Kenzie Langdock. You know, we can list. But for you, do you see any focus on like trying to put more of a focus on the Minnesota angle, or is it just sort of find the best players where I find them, they come, and that's it?
I think it's both, right? I want the best players, and wherever they come from, great. And I think the best players can come from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I will say too, Aurora 2 being added last season, I think really gives us a great pathway to connect with Minnesota players. So I'm really open to Aurora 2 players proving themselves and moving up to Aurora 1.
Yeah.
Cool.
Love that. Love that.
I will personally be at the majority of Aurora 2 training sessions. I will know those players. They will know me. They will be able to reach out to me at any time.
Yeah. I love Jen. I can't tell you how much I love that, because we watched Mark and I. If we weren't so busy with so much summer league stuff like Aurora 1's, WPSL, everything, the UPSL roster mix, like on all of these squads, is an absolute, like, it is such bait for Mark and I in equal time. Like the mix of player experiences and like player pathways, player routes, like it is such a soccer dorks like dream.
Yeah.
Like just Aurora.
No, Skills FC who played. I interviewed 2 players. The 2 players were a high school sophomore and a prison guard who was 28 and never played in college. And I was like, because I'd ask her the question, like, what academy did you play at? And she's like, I didn't play at an academy, dude. And I was like, where'd you play in college? Like, I didn't play in college. I'm a 27, or she's a National Guard, maybe not a prison guard, but I was just, yeah. So anyway, a really cool connection. And yeah, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, last year it was told to us at least, like, to be kept pretty separate of like the different teams. Yeah. And so I think the fact of just saying it's open, and of course they could have called someone up, but like the fact that you're saying it's open, I mean, that'll help recruitment even more, because that's what it should be, right? They can see the path, and then you can see it and reward them.
Yeah, totally. And there's a benefit there too for Aurora, right? If we bring in players from across the country who are top Division 1 players, they'll likely spend a couple summers with us and then go pro somewhere, or you know, they might not have as many roots tying them to stay in Minnesota.
Yeah.
If we can grow some kids who are from Minnesota, maybe they're playing college soccer in Minnesota and they play for Aurora 2 for 2 seasons, but we really keep working with them. Yeah. You know, maybe they're long-term settled in Minnesota and they get to the point where Aurora 1 is a fit. And having some of that balance on the roster and stability on the roster can be a benefit too. So I certainly cannot guarantee that will happen. Yeah. All I can see now is I'm really open to Minnesota folks showing up and showing out and proving themselves and being really present for those conversations. You know, I coached in Division 3 soccer in Minnesota. I have friends in Division 2 soccer in Minnesota. I played Division 1 soccer in Minnesota. I know there's great talent you know, and then as we said before, outside of that formal NCAA pipeline, I've played in a bunch of other community settings, and I know there's great folks, you know, whether it's a pickup in a parking lot somewhere in Minneapolis or, you know, I've played with folks at 9th Street coffee shop at 8 a.m. in the morning. Like, whatever it is, like there's a ton of talent in Minnesota, and I can't guarantee anything, but I'm absolutely open to those players getting involved.
Yeah. I mean, if people didn't watch much Aurora 2 or even just UPSL last year, I mean, there were so many teams, and even just if we only speak about Aurora 2, there were so many players that had such a fun spark and a great ability. And I'm trying to look it up to make sure I get it absolutely right. But there's a player like, I mean, Mandy Elton is a great example. Like D3 All-American, you watch her play, she has size, she has speed, she has technical ability, and it's like no one would watch that game and be like, oh, she's only a D3 kid. They'd be like, well, she can rip. Like, she can absolutely play.
Well,
but
Mackenzie Rath was the keeper for Aurora 2, and she ended up on the San Diego Wave this summer.
Yeah.
I know. I heard about that.
So it happens. It happens. No, and I was looking up, there was another player who signed pro, Matt. Yeah. But, I mean, it was very fun to watch, and that league's really brand new. So it doubled in size last summer. We'll see what happens this summer. But standards rising, and not the easiest league to follow, but easy for people to go in person, to go to Concordia right down here, and that made it fun for us. And
Well, and I realized the player I was thinking of. So Aya Makhled, who's a young player for St. Kate's. Like, there was one game where she finally got in, and I thought she looked great. The next game, she got more minutes. The next game, she got more minutes. And we interviewed her post-game, and people went absolutely nuts. Like, the level of community support for her was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, we did a post-game interview because people were so hyped. She's out there just carving as this, like, super technical number 10 from St. Kate's. I mean, one thing... Oh yeah.
I'll just say quickly, like, that's what I love about you guys and the work you're doing with Equal Time. Like, there is incredible girls and women's soccer across the whole state of Minnesota, and all of it deserves attention and credit. And I am a huge believer in that. And and I certainly at the same time, like, Aurora 1 needs to get the best talent from across the country, across the globe to win the USLW championship, which is what I want to do. So for me, it's a mix of being open to both.
Right. Well, and that actually segues really well into my next question, which is sort of in the several years of watching Aurora in the W League. And any fan of Aurora would know this. This is not a magical analysis I've done. Like, the level of play from the regular season to the playoffs has jumped up. That's not a miraculous thing to say about any league or any sport. That's just true. That's just true. In terms of
from year 1 to year 3, it was a lot. Like, the quality quads there. It wasn't just 5 or 6. It's
And we're talking about, you know, teams that players who Aurora had to go up against in the W League playoffs have gone on to be, like, not just pros, but like successful pros, national team call-in players, like the Indy 11 midfielder Hirschfelter, whatever her last name is, like, literally in national team camp. And these are the players you have to go against. So for me, as Mark and I sometimes refer to ourselves as, like, simple monkey brain soccer watchers, it's become pretty clear that, like, some Aurora players in the regular season, even like very successful regular season players, in the back of my head, sometimes I have an idea of, like, I mean, God, they are, like, ripping it pretty hard in the Heartland division, but I don't know if they can stand up by the time you're going against, like, an entire 6-player defensive unit that's like all ACC players or all SEC players or whatever. And so it's kind of funny because there's been star players, like very productive regular season players, where even during the season, Mark will ask me how a game went, and I'm like, I'm still not sure, just because the level is so incredible in the playoffs. Have you you've been around the team multiple seasons, you've watched a lot of these players. Do you find that dynamic to be sort of as legitimate as I'm making it seem, or is it, you know, or am I sort of defining it too specifically to say, like, certain players can even thriving players in the regular season might not be able to be, like, capable rotation players in the postseason? Is that, like, overstating it?
I wouldn't talk about it from a player capacity standpoint. I would just talk about it from the quality of the opponent standpoint.
Right.
And I think you're absolutely right to say that the quality of the opponent historically has taken a jump in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Now, the Heartland division changes every year. There's
including this year. Yep.
There's always shifts, and my
Yep.
hope is always that our division is as strong as possible.
Yep.
But I'll just tell you right now, I'm recruiting for playoff level play, and I am setting up our training cadence for playoff level play.
Yeah.
I have been to a USLW championship game and watched the other team walk away in double overtime, and I want to be back there. And I know that to be back there, we can't be excited about a 10-0 win.
Yeah.
In conference play, division play, we have to be eyes on being ready for playoffs.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, there's a balance there, right? I don't want to take anything for granted, and we have to earn getting out of our division. That is never a given.
100%.
But it's about having a view toward the long term.
Yeah. Well, and you'll have a bigger rival this year. Sioux Falls City, a team we cover extensively, a really high level club, just growing and growing the same way. Matt's got the mix. I got a couple of their shirts. They're sweet. So I'll ask about that. First question: do you have the medal, Jen? Do you have your silver medal?
Your second place medal from the first year?
Did you keep one? Do you have one?
From New Zealand?
No, from the W. Oh,
from the W.
Sorry, you have too many wins to keep track of, Jen.
So
but
many
no,
medals.
From
so many
the
medals.
silver medal, the W League silver medal. Do you have it?
Oh yeah, I do. I don't have it with me here in New Zealand, but I absolutely still have it.
So I know some people were kind of like almost didn't want one in the sense of like it's bitter to take, like, which I say no. I say as a huge successful season, you should have things to reward yourself. Like fair enough, like that's so.
I'm not sure if I have mine.
Matt,
I'm sure it's somewhere. This room is chaos.
Shout out to I will say Wes, one of the founders of Matt and others of the team, and he's my boss here. He gave his to his son, and his son Emil is really smart, and he's like, I don't understand why I got it. I didn't play. I was like, you're smart. You're right.
Great
you understand.
question. Yeah.
No, but yeah, no. I mean, I don't know. We cover different summer leagues like with Sioux Falls City, Jen, but I'm very excited because it'll be a great opponent for Aurora. They're really high, a high achieving and like high aspiring team. I don't know if that, if you pay attention to all the other of course, the local teams in Minnesota, but I guess, does that mean anything to have like another team? They're going to be a pro team next year, from the signal of their WPSL pro.
They've stated pro ambitions, similar to Aurora. And
the
reason we hype Sioux Falls City and why I really supported Green Bay when they were in Division 2 is like, there's a lot on the sporting side that is complicated or takes a lot of work or takes good coaching. A lot of the stuff outside of the sporting side, I don't want to boil it down too much, is sort of just, do you give a shit? Like, do you give a shit enough to make a broadcast that is high quality? And obviously stuff costs money. I'm not saying stuff doesn't cost money, but like, do you care enough to create an environment where players are platformed, where they're amplified, where they're given a chance to get good tape, where pro teams can find them? Like, some of those things are just decisions like very well resourced, like expensive youth clubs decide they actually don't care that much about or don't prioritize. And Mark has been best at calling this out. We don't always, like, these clubs have teams for different reasons. So like, not every team is going to have a not every club is going to have a team that they want broadcasted and get a game day attendance and all that stuff. But the teams that do put in all that work, like Sioux Falls City, end up being such a bigger platform for those players. And that's why we amplify them, because these players deserve that attention and they deserve that love. And the same with you, like Jen, I know I've chatted with you about the opponents Aurora's had in the past. Plenty of them have been good partners, but sometimes you're going to a place where there's no stream and there's no post-game meal and there's no showers and there's no all these things. And so Sioux Falls City will be, along with Rochester and Minnesota, like another good partner. Yes. But yeah, like you said, the division changes every year.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, so first I'll just say there, sometimes there are clubs with less resources that do the best they can. And
totally.
And we love that too.
Vlora is a great example of that.
Yeah. And I've worked at those places in the past, and you just do the best with what you can. And you've got to respect those places too. But yeah, I'm pumped about Sioux Falls City joining. I think the more places that are doing women's soccer well, the better. Like, I care about the sport holistically, and so like let's create great opportunities for as many players as possible. And I think whatever we can do to make the league healthier, you know, to say something very Minnesotan, right? Like, all boats rise. When the league's better for everybody, the league's better for us.
100%.
And I absolutely believe that.
That's that you did the Wellstone. We all do better when we all do better. Yeah, that's that.
Yeah,
I mean, that is what it is. Yeah. Hey, we'll take it.
We all do better when we all do better.
Nice dude in a school bus. We can't be mad at him.
Sure.
No, talk about. I do. You said you talked about watching games, Jen, because I mean, you aren't. I mean, you've had short breaks in between coaching gigs. It's not that you've been a full-time coach all the time. So there's time for you to enjoy it and actually watch the game. But like when you're a coach, you do so much recruiting video. You watch so many games. Like, I wonder, especially maybe starting now, but explain maybe how it's been better. Like, what's your watching soccer for fun schedule? Like, because even I love being at the bar and bartending for all these games, but I find myself realizing I don't watch a full 90, that often, because I'm just, you're doing stuff and I'm working and I enjoy it a lot. But how often do you watch the game for fun? How do you consume it personally?
Yeah.
And maybe it's better when you're on break from coach time.
Yeah, I watch the game for fun a bunch, but I will say it's hard to shut your
separate.
So sometimes I watch and I'm like, oh. But part of it is like, that's why it is fun. Like, I watch and like, oh, what are they doing there? What can I learn from how they're inverting their outside back, and like, in what situations are they choosing to do that?
What do you watch the most? What soccer do you watch for fun the most?
Not everybody will like this, but I am a big Pep Guardiola fan. He's obviously having a tough moment right now.
No, people will like it because he is having a tough moment, Jen. My Liverpool and Wolves fans at the bar are loving this moment. Pep's great.
Let's not forget Nate Pentz's allegiances. Shout out to Pentz Homes for supporting Equal Time. And so we unofficially are a Man City podcast.
Nate Pentz, I'll tell you this, because I'll have 20 Liverpool fans in this bar. That's our biggest Prem team and Wolves. But like, Nate Pentz will single-handedly bring me to like be 50-50 because he's the podfather. He's supported us forever. So Manchester City. I will say, to anyone watching, Manchester City fans have supported our work financially. So, Jen, we gotta, and look, you can't hate on Pep as a manager.
We ride blue. We ride blue, baby.
No, well, I don't ride blue, but you can't hate on Pep as a man. I mean, how can you not? I mean, to have that longevity, even this year, like they're gonna come back and probably get Champions League spot. Honestly,
top 4,
even
baby, top 4.
Hey, so anyway, but I appreciate you're able to watch it. Yeah, it's tougher. I try my best to put on like Women's Super League games from England. It's a little more like sporadic and like fractured, but I've had fun times putting those on too.
Yeah, so I catch as much Man City as I can. I will say I'm having a little trouble fully cracking the time zone change here in New Zealand.
Oh, dude.
I catch as much Man City as I can. When De Zerbi was at Brighton, I really enjoyed watching Brighton. And then I love watching women's soccer too. I really love the Barcelona women, watch as much of them as I can. Was a big fan of Chelsea women when Emma Hayes was there. When I was living in Wales, had the opportunity to go watch them play live when they played against Bristol. Being in New Zealand here, I'm catching Wellington Phoenix matches in the Australian League as much as I can. And then certainly try to catch a little bit of NCAA playoff football as much as I can.
That was fun for us, Jen, no, not even a joke. I mean, now that you have this position, when you go to a Wellington Phoenix game, are you trying to make some connections? Because
make some touches.
It's not. I mean, look. I mean, it's a high-level league to have players go in the W League, but Aurora did have someone who had A-League experience last summer, and I'm blanking, but. So maybe, do you get a pass maybe to go backstage now, Jen?
Oh, yeah.
I do have some
backstage.
I do have some Phoenix connections. Yeah, I think ultimately, I think having some global experience myself is a benefit in this role, both to recruit players to come play for Aurora, but also in the reverse. A big part of my job is to help get Aurora players pro connections. And, I have friends across the globe now.
Yeah.
And certainly I do think that's a benefit. But yeah, so season 2 for me at Aurora, we had Kenny Faulkner, who had played in the A-League.
Yeah.
It was great for us. So yeah, I think A-League talent is a good match for us to look into.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about like helping players launch on, like that's been a big part of Aurora's story is, you know, on purpose. It's not a pro team, and so the idea that coaches can get pulled away, players can get pulled away has always been a part of like the core identity, because that's the nature of empowering the players and even the coaches. And so like, you know, like Duong like goes to the Super
12
League,
teams total, 12 players total is what I saw in the announcement from the last signing. 12 players total. Yep, for this year. So that's huge.
So I'm curious, Jen, in terms of, are there any, do you think there's room to do even more of that in terms of going after players who maybe they actually already have pro experience, like a lot of them have, but they would need like a launching pad, or they need more exposure, or they need more whatever. Do you think there's room to lead even more into that? Because I don't know that I've always seen it be, I feel like it could be even more.
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah, and having been a bit in Europe now, Gianna, myself, I think I have a better grasp of some of the level of some of those leagues, which is nice. But yeah, a player who has played professionally abroad and wants to come back and play for us is a way of potentially getting in the door in the States.
Yeah.
I think that's the exact kind of player profile we're looking for.
Yeah.
I certainly am starting to have some of those conversations already.
Nice. Well, hey, we're looking forward to it. One last substantial question, and then there's a few fun ones we'll lob at you, but one last one, because you talked about watching the game and consuming the game. One thing I'm really curious about is, you know, Mark and I watch enough soccer at this exact level, like the Aurora level, the college D1, D2 level, that we can be okay, or I'll speak for myself, like I can be okay at picking out like what a team might be doing well, or like generally what a team isn't doing well. But that's such a different thing from then having to solve that problem. Like, you know, me being able to say, oh, the team isn't attacking very well because like they feel so congested in the attack, or like they do so well when there's space, but when there's no space, they're not doing well. That's very different than being the coach and having to do a game plan and a practice plan that then solves that problem. Do you find like the difference between just someone observing something or someone saying like, oh, this is true, versus having to solve for how to respond to it? Like that feels like such a coaching versus like analyzing thing to me, of like anyone can sort of see a problem or see something that's working, but having to actually solve for how to get there. Like, have you found yourself getting better at that side of the brain versus just like seeing what's happening on the field?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Identifying problems and solving problems are different buckets. My doctoral program would call coaching a sociocultural pedagogical process. And right, that means is like it's social, right? You're interacting with other people.
Yeah.
It's cultural. We're embedded within a soccer culture. Minnesota has a distinct soccer culture.
Yeah.
The players that I bring in will come from their own distinct cultural past.
Yeah.
And it's pedagogical. What does that mean? Approach to teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that is about the solving problem, right? Because you can identify the problem yourself. It can almost sort of be asocial.
Yeah.
One of the best coach educators I ever had, Caitlin Young, coaches in Utah, great coach educator. She told us, hey, if you're trying to figure something out, just take a step back and ask yourself, does this look like soccer? You know what I mean? Because sometimes coaches can get so in the weeds of like, I want my I really want 6 to be operating in these zones in this phases of play. And if you, in my mind, if you zoom in too much, sometimes you miss that. Like, does this look like soccer right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that's good for anything, Jen. I think honestly, where you're like, wait, now we're arguing about this. And it's like, we're trying to play soccer. It's kind of like where you're like Brazilian term would be like, want to play the beautiful game. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But it means focus on the game, play in the feel of it. Like don't make it. Yeah, I like that.
Well, there's like a in the weeds, and then there's like a on the balcony, like a micro and a macro vision, right? And I think like the identifying the problem piece can be sometimes really solitary. It's that moment of like stepping back and just asking yourself, like, does this look like soccer? And like, why or why not?
Yeah.
And then just solving the problem, that's when it becomes social. I can't solve the problem alone.
Yeah.
I'm a coach. I don't step foot on the field. I have to work with other people to solve the problem. And for me, that's where coaching becomes fun. Like, how do we do this really cool thing that's really hard to do together? Like, that's fun.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, right? Like, you experiment, you try some things and maybe they work or maybe they don't work. But that's the element where like solving it becomes about collaboration. It becomes beyond you. It becomes embodied too, right? The identifying is just sort of an analytical in your brain practice, but to solve it, like real people have to do real things with their bodies. It becomes an embodied practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
I mean, I've always been super curious about it just because, you know, the layers of interactions Mark and I have with coaches is always so funny. Like, I do broadcast prep calls with coaches where they can be pretty darn honest because they know I'm not going to quote them when I'm on the broadcast. I'll do a fully off the record, fully on background discussion. Like, after the game, you know, before we're recording, I can chat with you. If a coach trusts me, they can be fully on, like really, really honest and say like, well, this player wasn't good enough. We weren't good enough here, blah, blah, blah. But then if you even have the vaguely on the record stuff, there's so many pressures on making a public statement that, like Mark said, half the time coaches just say like, we want to play the right way, you know, which means everything and nothing. And, you know, you just say
one game at a time.
Well,
one game at a time, you guys.
That's everything.
You guys.
Yeah.
One day it's for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, that's why I like to I don't talk about it, but every NSIC coach who plays at Concordia comes to the bar afterwards and we have a full off the record conversation. I don't ever use that stuff, but it's really nice that I'm finally able to break through because it's too tough in the video.
I love it. Well, let's hit some quick hitters here at the end. Mark, I'm going to throw one in and then you can jump in with the rest of them. The first one I'm going to lob at you is in the hot seat right away. If fans are watching right now, how many players from last year's squad, like how many of these fan favorites, what very roughly, like what chunk of the roster we think is coming back versus what's going to be new blood? What kind of mix are we thinking very first several hours of being the head coach?
All I'll tell you is there will be returning players and they will be fun to watch. That's all I'm going to give you right now.
Right.
And part of that is
will they be related to each other, Jen? Will they be related to each other?
The
totally random question. I don't even know who that could refer to.
The 3 Rap Sisters chant is one of my favorites, so I'm hoping to hear that one too. But there will be returners and I've always felt like returners do an especially good job putting on a show because they're so comfortable in that space.
Yeah.
Nice to continue the culture for sure. Yeah, it's been, even with the people going pro, there's always been like, and people going pro in life, by the way, like in cool things, like, becoming ceramics teachers or becoming dentists or,
I will forever brag about Christelle becoming a dentist and Jill becoming a teacher. Like, they're great people doing really important things in the world.
Yeah, it's easy to brag about them too because they both happen to be super rad.
Christelle, shout out. Looking forward to when you open your own practice, and we'll see what goes on with these teeth up here later. But Jen, you can say no comment, but you're from Mass. You're a Northeasterner. What were your thoughts on the Boss Nation name for NWSL? They've come back for people. They've admitted they came back. They said, guess what? We're going to reevaluate because they heard from sport and said, now we're going to include sporters. So credit to the squad to the team. They had a lot of feedback. And so maybe should have got the feedback ahead of time. But I don't know if Boss Nation was something like people were hyped to say in Boston.
Do people say that?
Boss Nation. Like, I don't know.
I can't speak for all Bostonians. I certainly don't walk around saying Boss Nation. I grew up a huge Boston Breakers fan.
Of course.
The original WUSA, WPS. To this day, if people ask me what my favorite team is, I typically say the Boston Breakers.
Dude, that's sweet. That's sweet, Jen.
I brought it with me here to New Zealand. I still wear my Kelly Smith Boston Breakers jersey.
Hell yeah, dude. As you should. Kelly Smith. Hell yeah.
What I will say about the new Boston club is I am beyond thrilled that there's going to be an NWSL club in Boston.
Yeah.
It is a community that loves soccer, and myself growing up there, like I grew up post winning the 1999 Women's World Cup, and when the league was just starting, like that was massive for me, believing believing there could be like a life for me in soccer. Like that's huge, and people in Boston deserve that exposure. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, well, and compared, the Breakers probably maybe didn't have to pay to join the league. The most recent NWSL squad in Denver paid $110 million. So the league is changing. And I mean, a tougher thing for Aurora to try to get into that league, but a good sign of the business of the league. And also there's a bunch of other pro leagues. So different times from when Boston Breakers. But I know it is tough because when you've had legacy teams like that, you fully understand why a team wants to set their own path and they don't want to use an old name, right? But like I'm sure there's some fans who wish, like, gosh, you could just call it the Boston Breakers and kind of redo it and rebrand it. But you could,
I definitely had that thought. I got pictures of myself as a kid standing with the seal mascot. Like I definitely had that thought.
Oh, the seal mascot. That's great.
Yeah, because the breaker was like a wave. But I think, right, like there's probably some sort of issue there with trademark or whatever. And starting a new chapter is good too. I think reaching out to supporters for input on the name is a smart decision.
Well, it's part of what made the Aurora one work, because like they didn't also limit it to say we have to follow the exact fan vote, but it's a really good way to know how your supporters are feeling about it. So you at least, the narrowing down like of Aurora's, for example, the last like 4 were cool. You could have picked Foxfire. You could have picked, what, I forget the other ones now, but
Well, and I tell people all the time when, that early founding group that I was a part of, we got to see some of the like very rough mocks that didn't even make it out publicly. And I've probably said this on shows before, and I'm sure people don't give a shit. Some of those I thought were like somehow even better. There was stuff in there. There was, or a better way to say it is those 3 designers, like there was so many good options that like anything would have crushed for sure. Well, and another one, Jen, this is a little in the weeds, but the very first year Aurora used like a camcorder from a department store to try and get game tape, and they've since leveled up and using like Speedio and whatever, but that initial camcorder still lives on, and it now has a second life as a player cam behind the scenes. Our question to you is, we're not even asking to see it, although if you get it, you can show us. Have you seen any of this player cam footage?
I was around when the player cam became a player cam.
Yes.
I have not personally seen the footage, but a Pep Guardiola trick is like show players film of themselves right before a big game. And so I will say it's been on my mind to sort of do something with it.
Dude, the volume, can you imagine though? I can imagine those, like Mariah Wynn probably had it rolling. I think sometime last year, one of the players maybe hinted like, they at least even joked about like, you could make a behind the scenes thing. The editing work
first of all, Mark can speak to this. I'm so like bitchy. I do so much filming of stuff. I have no idea if any of these players know how to shoot. Like, I have no idea if any of them know how to film. As Mark said,
they're probably better than us. I don't know.
There might be like 6-hour tapes straight running all the way to Chicago. We don't know how much tape this is. Although saying that, Mariah, I'm sure you're watching this. Mariah or whoever has the tapes. If you want to send it to us, like,
what do you mean the whole thing?
We're here.
Okay, for a total callback. You ever watch Dare to Dream, like the documentary about the women's national team? So Julie Foudy used to on that team was the one with the camcorder.
Yeah,
and
that was a VHS. That was a VHS.
It was this. Yeah. So much of that footage is like why those documentaries are like so.
That's true.
Grabbing.
That is an amazing. No, I know, because if they made one, it's just it could be very good. I mean,
True.
the team has so much fun. I'd love to watch them practicing their celebrations and practice if there was anything of that, because like they practice some of them.
You know what's really wild, and no one has drawn the straight line between these two dots, and I'm about to do it, and maybe I'll do it on social media. I don't know if you are a big fan of American football Minnesota Vikings, Jen, but they have been famous this season for their team celebrations. Good. They have been really famous. And let me tell all the fans out there where those players learn that. They're working out in a room with giant glass windows overlooking Aurora training every day of the week. So here I'm going to send this to the
I don't know if they ever overlapped, but we'll say they did. June minicamp.
No, they did overlap, because we used to hear, because the staff that run Viking Lakes, which is the whole complex, they said that when they talked to Viking staff, Vikings players did talk about, like, who's this team out here? Like, what's this team? Like, Vikings players do see it. So I am officially crediting Aurora celebrations with why the Vikings are good at celebrations.
Take it. Okay. Yeah, Camp Rock. I mean, it does yeah.
I really like you making that connection, and I think we have to get that out and about.
Yeah.
I definitely saw, like, I feel like the biggest one that I saw on social media was God, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the movie, but the Lindsay Lohan.
Camp Rock. Well, they did Camp Rock and Parent Trap. They did Parent Trap. Did the handshake from Parent Trap. And then they did that. Yeah.
I had non-sports friends and family sending me the Parent Trap one.
Exactly.
So look, we'll get creative. There is no doubt in my mind. There's going to be some amazing celebrations this summer. Yeah. And if there's a little collab with the Vikings, I'm all for it.
Actually,
it's cute to see, because football culture can be kind of toxic. It's really cute to watch the dudes practicing those dances. It makes me want to. I root for them a lot harder, because I'm not even 100%. Big into the bikes. I'm like, you 100%. Guys, you're spending 3 hours at the hotel practicing from Camp Rock. It's 100%. Adorable.
And I don't know. I'm going to get this name wrong, because again, Mark and I have very clearly shown that we don't know anything about the NFL anymore. I think the safety's name is Bynum, like the guy who leads most of the choreography. And so, listen, we'll reach out. We'll find a way. Jen, as a slight follow-up, I don't think we've ever had a coach be part of a celly. Is that true?
Oh, shit.
And you were just espousing like all of this love for celebrations.
With the blazer.
Coaches have their own little celebration on the side. I don't know if we've ever been involved. I mean, our celebration is pretty tame. It's like a high five across the staff.
Yeah.
But
are you open?
I'm open. The player celebrations are fully created by the players. I'm not going to interfere with that process, but if they want to involve me, I'm game. And if they don't, that's fine too.
Well, let's just send a direct message right now. A lot of very, very top players watch our shows, every single one of our shows. And so they are watching right now. And so just letting you know, when Jen reaches out to you and she's pitching you, she's like, hey, you can come be our holding midfielder, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, look at soccer culture. Look, all these things. You're going to be like, that's all chill. Are you guaranteeing me you'll be in a celly that I do right now? Just put that to Jen.
I like it, because I don't believe Matt saying top players watch our shows a lot, but I do believe they'd watch when a new coach is hired. So I do actually believe that players might watch.
I always say that sarcastically. I'm not convinced anyone but parents watches these shows. It's all.
Shout out. Hey mom, what up?
Hey mom.
Hey mom.
Hey Matt and Mark's mom. Yeah. I'll say two things to that really quickly. One, on a serious note, like actually full on from recruiting perspective, like having fun to me is a huge part of being a good soccer player.
100%.
And Aurora always embraces having fun.
100%.
The Sallies. Yeah, it's because I'm like, when did people get to start doing this? Like, they didn't get to do it when they're in club, right? People in club do they get to celebrate? I don't know. It's amazing.
Or you just don't have 6,000 fans cheering you on while you celebrate.
So it's not worth it.
If you did it in college, you might literally get yelled at.
Well, that's what I assume. But anyway, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and then second thing briefly is like, I'm not afraid to make a fool of myself. So if there is some sort of stupid TikTok dance I need to do, I'll embarrass myself. That's fine.
This is great.
Yeah. Get vertical, Jen. It's all right. It'll just be within the tight pods. Yeah, don't worry about that.
Well,
we don't have it. We don't know what goes on there. But Jen, I will say also, going way back, when you were just a college player, it was only a couple of years ago. I'm not going to shout out the year, but they asked you what your career aspirations were when you played at the U. You said you wanted to be a college soccer coach. I think you've surpassed it, my dude. I think you've achieved that goal, because now you are the head coach of one of the hypest, most successful, and the first women community-owned soccer team at this scale in the U.S. So we're hyped for it, Jen.
Did you find some old?
It's from Beyond the Pitch. I mean, it's a first page Google. I didn't go that deep. Yeah,
this is a rare. The internet said it from Mark. This is usually I do the absurd internet deep dive.
We just title. I mean, I look up stuff. Yeah, no, I didn't have to go deep.
I've always wanted to be a coach, and I think, look, at the time there weren't a ton of opportunities for high level coaching that weren't college soccer, and so to be at Aurora is a dream come true that I'm not sure I could have. I couldn't have imagined it at the time because it didn't exist, right?
Yes.
And there's incredible NCAA programs that we hope to work with, and Aurora in its own right is something unique and incredible too. So I'm really thrilled to be here.
Well, we babbled on. We kept you for a very long time. You gave us a ton of time. I will just say at the end, Jen, is there anything we didn't hit on or anything you want to hit? Like we jokingly said, players and coaches would be watching this, but assuming they are, or even if there's just anything we didn't ask you about, is there anything you want to just close on and hit home on the day you get officially announced as the new head coach for Minnesota Aurora?
Or the day before, day ahead? It's tough with New Zealand. We don't know what day it is.
Yeah. It's no, thank you for giving me a little space here at the end. What I'll say is a huge and genuine thank you to all of the previous coaches and players and behind the scenes staff and board members who have helped Aurora be what it is. A huge thank you to Equal Time Soccer. I totally believe in what you guys are doing. And then last but not least, like an incredible thank you to all the fans, and like, please keep showing up and showing out for us. Minnesota Aurora is special, and a big part of what makes us special is the fans. And like when we lost in year one, and like you guys said, like some people didn't want to keep the medals, like that was meaningful to me, because what we did in year one is we built a really cool connection with fans.
Yeah.
And I am beyond grateful to all of the fans in Minnesota, and I can't wait to keep it going.
Yeah.
Amazing. Shout out to Revant Tillette. I got the gear here for the Revant Tillette. Shout out with the trombones and all the goofy stuff going on. And usually our mob and Sissy drove down for every game this summer. But yeah, shout out. I will say, because thank you, Jen, for shouting out the fans. I'm really excited later this month, I should say, at Blackheart, the International Supporters Conference is happening. So there's a bunch of people who are NWSL supporters. Army of the Falls with Sioux Falls actually is a group that is a ISC group. I don't know if they're going to come. They're kind of new. But there'll be people from Revant Tillette. We're excited to meet all the different type of supporters and let them in on our soccer culture here. And Aurora is a huge part. I know we'll have people hyping them up, and we'll have our equal time stuff going on. So yeah. Awesome. Well, Jen, very cool to connect with you.
Well, and as you mentioned, Jen, huge shout out to the previous head coaches and coaching staffs for Aurora, of which you are a part of, because this is a highly visible squad with a lot of pressure, and those coaching staffs have done a great job. Excited to see the team you build out. Jen, a long time equal time favorite for all the community work, the soccer work, the human work that she has done. Thanks so much for joining us, Jen.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.